I'm going to describe the components of inclusion that, from my experience and my research, these are the components that are needed in order to make inclusion work in a school or in a district. First of all, we need to have a vision and a philosophy of inclusion that states all students belong across the whole school or the whole district, and all stakeholders must embrace that philosophy. The district and building leadership should communicate that philosophy in all of their communications and in all of their expectations. As teachers are designing their instruction, they should be using universal design with the idea that all students will be successful in their classroom, and they're integrating different types of activities and different types of assessments so that all students will be successful. And lastly, in this vision and philosophy should be a statement about individual students that is focused on individual students, not the mass of students, but the success of individual students. Next, we need an infrastructure that works, and the infrastructure is broken down into 5 parts. One is the schedule in the school. Are the teachers scheduled so that they will have time to collaborate with other teachers, time to move from one room to another if they're providing support in more than one room? So is the schedule supportive to make inclusion work? Second is collaboration time for all of the teachers that need to work together to ensure student success. There needs to be some sort of professional development and ongoing support for teachers as they are learning new skills and practicing new approaches. There needs to be some sort of data collection and analysis that looks at the success of their teaching and the success of individual students. And overall, there needs to be an infrastructure of a reflective culture. This is a culture that says we are learning as we go along, we're learning from our mistakes, we are experimenting and trying things, we're using research-based strategies, but we want to see if they work in our environment with our population. Within a school, you may want to make some agreements. Are there classroom routines that can be consistent across classrooms? Are there classroom and school policies about when students can go to their locker or how students keep track of their homework? There needs to be some sort of positive behavior support system across the building that reinforces positive behavior rather than focusing attention on negative behavior. The response to intervention procedures need to be consistent and agreed on across the building for students who may need extra behavioral support or extra academic support. And then teachers need to agree on certain learning or thinking routines that are going to be emphasized across classrooms so that they're reinforced for students in different settings. So let's move on to the component of instruction. Effective instruction is focused on student engagement, not focused on the old historic model where the teacher stands in front and students are passive, but different strategies to help students become engaged in the learning process. Teachers will build strong collaborative and cooperative learning activities throughout and will focus on thinking skills. It's not enough for students to just remember knowledge, but to be able to use that knowledge for thinking. And often teachers use structures and organizers to help students make sense of all of the different new content they're learning. Let's look a little deeper at structures and organizers. You see on this slide some graphic organizers that are used, webs and flowcharts, comparison, contrast. But the ones that are in bright color are foldables that are catching on more and more. They started in elementary schools, but now I'm seeing them in middle and high schools. These are methods that teachers are using to have students first fold a paper into 4 parts or 6 parts or in tabs so they can already get their brain prepped for how many components this new piece of content is going to break into. Okay, what about teachers? There need to be clarified teachers' roles. Within the special education law, it states that there is a continuum of special ed services and that the IEP team should be looking at what is the least restrictive environment for that student to be educated in. And this continuum starts with simply having the special educator mentor the general educator, or supporting the student to develop their own autonomy, to ask for the accommodations they need themselves, all the way down through a resource room and a separate building for providing special ed services. The law does say that there is a continuum of services. Let's look more closely at two of these. In co-teaching, the co-teacher must have some co-planning time with their partner, some co-problem solving time with some tools that they can use to co-problem solve, and then the focus, of course, is on co-instructing in the classroom. That co-instructing boils down to 6 different roles. One teach, one support, where one teacher is taking the lead for a part of the lesson and the second one is supporting student learning. Parallel teaching, where they divide the students into 2 groups, making the teacher-student ratio smaller and teaching about the same thing. Station teaching, where the students rotate and teachers take different roles within the stations. Alternative teaching, where you have one teacher working with a smaller group, either doing some remedial work or some advanced work. One teach, one observe, where the second teacher is collecting data about student performance or student behaviors. And then team teaching, which is a combination of all of these. Another model of special education services that are emerging more in the state of Delaware is the learning support coach model. In this model, the administrator must decide how is that special educator going to be assigned. Will they be assigned just to a content area, for example, the math learning support coach or the English learning support coach? Will they be assigned to a certain grade level, so they might be the 8th grade learning support coach? Or they could be assigned to a team where there's an English, math, social studies, science, and special educator all on a team. And the special educator rotates with the same group of students to those 4 academic teachers. How the teacher is scheduled can make or break the effectiveness of this model. The learning support coach focuses on coaching students and coaching teachers. Let's look at those in more depth. Coaching students includes all of these things, from daily mentoring the students, dropping into classes, pulling students out for small group instruction, providing accommodations on a test, providing contact for parents, supervising assistive technology, or reinforcing the student's positive behavior support plan. They also coach teachers, and that coaching is either student-focused or instruction-focused. Under student-focused, they're talking to the general ed teacher about the student's disability, their degree of metacognition, which means how much the student understands their disability and understands what strategies work for them, and where the student is in developing self-advocacy. They also talk with the teacher about the specific accommodations that student needs, what positive behavior support plan the student is working on, the results of a functional behavior analysis, and where that student is in the response to intervention system. Regarding instruction, the special educator could provide the general ed teacher content enhancements, organizers, and structures that can be used for teaching the whole class. They would coach them on learning strategies that students could use to help them learn the content, and occasionally they're co-teaching with the general educator. No matter which model of special education service is used, when special educator and general educator teams are formed, they go through some stages of collaboration, starting at the beginning where they're uncomfortable with each other and cautious in the feedback they give each other, working through compromising where they take some risks and try out some ideas that the other teacher encourages, and eventually they get to the collaborating stage where they're actually working as partners with each other. The research shows that it takes about 3 years to get to the collaborating stage on a consistent basis. Another component of inclusion is student development. Teachers need to be focused on how this student is developing from a small child into a young adult who could function independently in the world. Part of this has to do with normal child development, and part of it has to do with disability awareness, empowering the student rather than enabling them, encouraging them to develop a growth mindset and owning their own learning and being responsible for their own success, developing the skills to have self-determination and advocate for themselves, develop executive function skills, become aware of what careers they're interested in and what supports are available out in the world as they are moving up into adolescence. Goal setting, starting at a young age, and developing leadership in their own life and in the community. Use of assistive technology if it's appropriate. Many schools are now helping students develop through the use of student-led IEPs. More about that another time. And the final component of inclusion is family partnerships. The family guideposts that is just being published at this time focuses on 3 roles for families: become fully informed, support your youth, and advocate for improvements. Family roles in the special education world include collaborating in the IEP process, being instructors in the youth's emergent independence. How do students learn to be independent? The best coach for them is their families. Decision makers and evaluators, they provide feedback to the school on how the student is developing and how the program is working. Peer mentors for other families. And finally, families are great systems change agents and can be used to help shift a system. As professionals are developing partnerships with families, here are 7 tips for them. 1 is establish 2-way communication. Make sure that you're not only sending information to families, but you're also listening to them. Develop cultural acceptance of the families who come from a variety of cultural diversity within your community. Engaged in shared decision making so that it's not you making all of the decisions and just sending the final results off to families. Family input is vital in this. Having some strategy for resolving disputes. Fostering youth ownership, you and families working together in this. Including families in school and agency improvement efforts. And finally, building further capacity to expand family engagement, encouraging families who have taken a strong role to become leaders in other strategies to engage other families. So these are the 6 components that it takes to make inclusion work.